Hey everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with our weekly lecture series. My TD's acting up today, so this will be a funny lecture because I'll make a lot of funny faces. I guess I should be a comedian because I make funny faces. This lecture is quite complicated, and I'm guessing of all the lectures I've done in my 35-year or so career of lecturing, I guess it's been longer than that, maybe 40 years. I guess I'm older than I thought I was. This lecture, if you listen to the lecture and do what I say, will be the one that gets you the most rating points. So if you want to get a lot of rating points from a lecture, this is the lecture. Other lectures, you might lose rating points. I don't know. Okay. This one, you'll definitely gain. Okay, the title of the lecture is Never Resign. And what I want to talk about in the lecture and what the sponsor wants to talk about are different. So I'm going to talk about both, but 80-85% will be what the sponsor wants because they gave the money. The sponsor's name is Anonymous. So Anonymous is the most likely person to sponsor a lecture. So Anonymous sponsors a lot of lectures. It would actually be funny if it was the same anonymous person, but it's not. Okay, the sponsor has a message. I'm not sure they wanted me to read it. But if they didn't want me to read it, why did they write it? So I'll read it. I come from a chess family, and the first book I ever read was a chess book, parenthetical. It likely had more images than most books lying around Eastern European homes. Somehow, I lost touch with the game. I am a physician now, and Ben's work on YouTube helped me through a very difficult and isolating time during the pandemic in New York City, as well as a few other challenging times in my young career. Best of all, it got me to rediscover chess as an adult. Thank you, Ben and Karen. Okay. And then the sponsor wrote a message about what he wants the lecture to be on that's different than the sponsor message, which I'll read now. Never resign. When grandmasters were not in time trouble, I can't guarantee they were in time trouble or not in the lecture, but I'll assume they weren't. And resign too soon. And actually, resigning because you're in time trouble isn't an issue typically with grandmasters. They don't resign when they're in time trouble because they're in time trouble. They're just like, I got to make a move. They don't resign and they should have played on when they're in time trouble. That's actually not a big deal. That doesn't happen very often. Potentially, they miss a good save from a difficult position or counterplay or their own mate combination. Maybe they thought they were losing, but modern engines have proved them wrong, albeit with perfect play. Good learning for us mere mortals. Okay. Now, what I want to talk about in the lecture is actually something else. But the examples that I have are based on what the sponsor wants. So a sponsor gets what they want, and I get to make the lecture better by talking about what I want. Okay, so a more important issue than the sponsor's theme, the sponsor's theme is mainly just humorous because a grandmaster is not losing and they resign. That's funny. Okay, unless you're the grandmaster, then it's less funny. I'm probably the only grandmaster who's ever going to watch this video. Even I'm not going to watch it, but I'm participating in it. So the rest of you, don't know what it's like. You guys have probably resigned and then later found out that you weren't losing, which is a funny situation. But actually, a worse problem is resigning when you are losing. And this is very confusing to the gawking rabble because Grandmaster chess, and I might add Super Grandmaster chess, is different than chess played by normal people who are casual players, which is 99% of you people watching. And when Grandmasters resign, I would say 90 to 99% of the time, it's reasonable. Okay, not 100%, but 99%. When lower rated players resign, it's like 50-50. So half the games that you've resigned in your life, you shouldn't have resigned. So I have a rule for my students. This is the rule most often broken by my students. In my life, I've been teaching this for over 40 years. Never resign. Okay? You're not good enough to resign. And more importantly, your opponent's not good enough to resign to. Now, if you're playing Magnus Carlsen, which you're not, and you're down a queen for nothing, which you would be, then if you resigned, I wouldn't complain very much, but I would complain a little, but not very much. But you're not playing Magnus Carlsen, and you're not down a queen, and you're resigning anyway. Okay, frankly, terrible. I'm known as a late resigner. At the super top level for his career, the most late resigner was Gadakomsky. Gadakomsky didn't resign until it was ridiculous. He would play on 10, 20 moves in positions other players of his skill level would have resigned. Okay, which I agree with. Don't resign. Now, I have a funny story. For reasons that can't be explained in the video because it's too weird, my second wife, who was not USCF rated when I met her, played in the US Championship. And when I say she played in the US Championship, I'm not talking about the US Women's Championship. Okay, and when she played in the US Championship, she was 1600. And because of the way she qualified, they don't do that anymore. You can't qualify to the US Championship the way that you used to could have because she got in. Okay, she qualified through normal means. It's just that very few players tried to qualify, so she got in sort of automatically. Very, very silly story. Anyway, I didn't prepare her for her games because I was playing in the US Championship. So we could have been paired. But I gave her advice. Okay, I was preparing for my own games. I can't be preparing for her games. And I said, don't resign. Okay, and unlike most wives, she listened. She went 0-9. She lost all 9 games. Her opponents were typically 600 to 1,000 points higher rated than she was. And she was winning one of them, and she was drawing another one. But she didn't resign. She got checkmated all 9 games. Probably a record that will never be equaled or broken in U.S. Championship history. Getting checkmated all 9 games. Truth hurts. Anyway, one of the players in the tournament asked me why my wife didn't resign against her. Because, it got silly at some times. And I said, I told her before the tournament she's not allowed to resign. And then the person said, oh, okay. She was like almost mad that she didn't resign. Then when I told her what I told my wife, she said, oh, okay, that's fair. Okay, my first wife was a stronger player. She played in the U.S. Olympic team for the women. She played in U.S. Women's Championships. And she was a typical player. She wasn't scoring 0 out of 9. In the Olympiad, she got 10 out of 13. God damn. Okay, so she was a good player. My first wife was WIM. And we were living in Belgium, as people do. And we were playing in a 15-minute tournament. And that 15-minute tournament, I beat Judah Polgar. God damn. Anyway, when the tournament started, she wanted advice. My first wife said, I've never played a 15-minute tournament. What do I do? And my advice, as per usual, was don't resign. I said, I don't care what you do, don't resign. If somebody asked me now, like Karen, my current wife, for advice in a 15-minute tournament, I would say to play very quickly and never have less than 5 minutes. That would be my advice to a student now. But, okay, my advice then was never resign. And the third or fourth game of the tournament, she resigns in an equal position. So we got divorced eventually. The reason she resigned in her mind was she thought she was losing the exchange. I mean, losing the exchange means you're probably better. Okay, but I showed her that she wasn't losing the exchange. She had a move she didn't see. And then I explained, if you are losing the exchange, you don't resign. Even at the super GM level, GMs wouldn't resign because they lost the exchange. They wouldn't even care. Okay. So a more important thing to learn from this lecture is to never resign, which is basically the name of the lecture. And if you have a losing position and the engine says your opponent's +3, +4, +5, and you resign, that's wrong. Don't resign. Now, these are examples in this lecture, because that's what the sponsor wanted, where the grandmaster in question thought they were losing and resigned, but they weren't losing. The first two examples are the most ridiculous. The other examples aren't ridiculous because, and again, this is complicated to explain to you. When you resign, when you're not losing, that's actually less egregious than when you resign when you are losing, confusing the audience. And you might be like, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, well, I'm smarter than you, so I'm going to explain why it makes sense. If you're losing and you resign, you might not have lost. Your opponent can mouse slip, your opponent can lose on time, your opponent can blunder, the game can turn around over a series of moves. Okay. If you resign when you're not losing, the reason is you don't know you're not losing. You think you're losing. And the variation in question where you're not losing, which is what the sponsor is interested in, is not something you're going to see. If you saw it, you wouldn't resign. So if you resign and the engine says you shouldn't resign, you can go here, 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 and it's equal. Or you can go here, 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 and you win. Well, you weren't going to do that. You were going to lose. That's why you resigned. You didn't see the continuation that gave you a good position. If you resign when you are losing, you've actually correctly looked at the situation, noticed you were losing, and resigned. And that's terrible. Okay, you should never resign. And I could lecture forever about students who didn't resign because I told them not to, and they won or drew games where they wanted to resign. The funniest was I was teaching an expert 2,000 player. He was playing a 1,500, and my expert student played queen takes g6, missing the g6 pawn was defended. It was defended by a pawn. I don't remember if it was the f pawn or the h pawn. Anyway, his opponent took his queen. This was in a slow game. And my student was down a queen for a pawn. Then I went to the Skittles room, director's room, and I was talking to my homies, and I said, my student's going to win. And one of the players, a friend of mine, a former student actually, who was 2,300, said, your student won't win for 2 reasons. He said, A, your student might resign because he's down a queen. B, if he doesn't resign and the game's turning around, like he's coming back, his opponent will offer a draw because his opponent's 1,500, he's a chicken, and your student will accept because he's down a queen. And I said, my student's not allowed to resign, so that's not going to happen. And my students not allowed to take a draw. I tell my students, don't offer a draw and don't accept a draw. They don't listen to that either. Oh, students don't listen. They say, Ben, here's hundreds and thousands of dollars. Tell me what to do, and then I won't do it. It's a good use of their money. Anyway, the 2300 player thought he got me. He said, do you want to bet? And I got him by saying yes. When I said yes, he was really taken aback that I would bet money that my student would win down a queen. He ended up not betting. I was too confident. And when the game ended, my student was up 2 queens. And when the game ended, the other guy said to my student, why did you sacrifice your queen? And I was at the board congratulating my student for winning. And I said to the guy, he didn't sacrifice his queen. He didn't see pawn takes queen. And the guy said, really? And my student said, yeah. Because it's not a sacrifice, you just hang your queen. Obviously wasn't a sacrifice. And then the other guy then went on to explain that it was a good sacrifice. Okay, so hopefully if you can beat a 1500 player down a queen in a slow game, that would make you not want to resign against anybody, because you don't beat anybody down any material. Okay, so first example is from the game Shirov Timman. I was familiar with this game before the sponsor sponsored the lecture. This was one of the games I thought of. And this was ridiculous because the position's so complicated. If you're going to resign, you might as well be down a queen and your opponent's a grandmaster. Then if you resign, I'm not going to make fun of you. In this position, Timman resigned. Okay, it's a super complicated position. White's up a pawn. Obviously, over the next 2 or 3 moves, black can take this pawn. Okay, and Timman realized if I take this pawn, white's going to play f5, and then if I do nothing, he'll play f6, and I'm losing. And if I take, he'll play h4, h5, g6, and queen the h pawn, because the black king is going to be over here. Black king doesn't do a good job stopping the h pawn. And if I don't take the pawn, then, white's just going to win. White's a pawn up. Pawns on both sides of the board. So Timman resigned. Then the engine, and this was in 1996. So the engine in 1996 would get completely crushed by engines today. But engine in 1996 was still grandmaster strength or better. The engine said this is a draw. Now, I wouldn't consider resigning here. Frankly, ridiculous. We have somebody new join the lecture. Okay, and what's funny is I've been lecturing for 18 to 19 minutes and I haven't made a move yet. Okay, so the sponsor wants a refund. Okay, so the engine says black can draw, and it says one of the things Timman was wrong about was when black takes the pawn and white plays f5, f6, that position is not winning. Timman assumed it was winning because that pawn on f6 is pretty strong. But black has a passed c pawn. So let's look at some of the variations. King e6 loses because the engine says so. King d6 does not lose. Instead of king d6, Timman resigned. And as you all know, about 6 weeks ago, Timman passed away. Shirov is still alive. Okay, so h4, because remember that variation I showed you where you take and then f5 and then take and then h5 and then white makes a queen. King takes f5. Now black just coolly plays king d5 or king d6. Now Timman saw this and Timman thought f6 and white wins. Because, look at that f pawn. And the c pawn's not dangerous. My king stops the c pawn, and I got this f pawn, and your king stays over here, and my king wins the c pawn, and I win, which is true. What's not true is the king has to stay on f7 and e6. The king can stay on d7 and d6 and e6, and white actually can't win the pawn. And if white wants to win the pawn, white plays f7, black takes the f pawn, white takes the c pawn, that's a draw. Okay, so this is engine analysis. Black's moves aren't hard to find. Just normal moves. Nothing crazy. Okay. And probably Timman saw something like this in his analysis, and he's like, this is hopeless. My king's on the 2nd rank, his king's on the 5th rank, he's got the protected pass pawn on f6. But king e8 holds the balance. It stops the f pawn, and if you play king c6, I play king d8, and white doesn't have a move. Now, what's funny about that is, if white played king c6 and black played king d8 in this position, black is actually in zugzwang. Black can't move. But it's not black's turn to move. So that's why black plays king e8. Okay, so king e6, that looks pretty good. King f8, you can't play king d7 because then black wins with c5. Then white can resign and I won't complain. Okay, and white can't win. And this is a draw. And Timman probably knew this was a draw, like this kind of position. King g8. And white can't do anything. Black just moves the king. Okay, so the final position is a draw, and I didn't play any miraculous moves for black. I didn't play some brilliant, combination that drew. Okay, I played king d6, king takes c6, which you would play in a blitz game. And then in a slow game, no super grandmaster is going to take this and let white get a queen. No, nobody's going to do that. Okay, so you're going to move the king, and then in this position, you basically have to play king e8 when they play king d5. And that's probably the move that Timman missed. He probably thought this had just lost because white's king is moving up and the c pawn looks weak. But yeah, king e8 stops the f pawn, defends the c pawn. The engine says it's a draw. So Timman resigned in a drawn position. The truth hurts. Now, to the sponsor's credit, because I was making fun of the sponsor's idea for a lecture, I said, if you resign and you don't see the way not to lose, you're going to lose anyway. In my opinion, if Timman didn't resign and just played the best he could, he would have drawn. This wasn't too hard for Timman. Timman was one of the top 10 players in the world for 20 years. Okay, you don't get that because you're lucky. And I want to tell you something about Timman. Of course, you can watch my Timman lecture, which I gave recently, 6 weeks ago. I'm sure I've given more than one Timman lecture. Timman in 1992, but I could be within 4 years. It could be it was 91. It was either 91 or 92. There was a tournament in Paris with all the best players in the world. And it was a knockout tournament, 25-minute with a 10-second delay or increment, I forgot. It was 1,000 years ago, so I don't remember the time control. I know it was 25-minute. Okay, and it was 2-game matches. And Timman, in succession, beat Kamsky, Anand, Karpov, and Kasparov, and none of the matches went into overtime. He beat them all in 2 games. None of the matches were 1-1. He beat them all 2-0 and 1.5-1/2. God damn. So Timman is good enough to draw this position, since it is a draw, but you can't draw when you resign. So no resigning. If only Timman hadn't resigned. Now, if Timman didn't resign, then I couldn't show you this game. So thanks, Timman. Okay, this is one of the most famous games ever. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, it's new to you because you don't know any games. I was watching this game live. This is the game Deep Blue Kasparov. And Deep Blue has had other names like Deep Thought. And when Deep Blue and Deep Thought and whatever else it was called, the IBM computer, when it played Super GMs and World Champions, it drew or lost. But they were close matches. Then the Deep Blue one, this one, 1997, this is the one that beat Kasparov. And in this position, after Rook A6, Kasparov resigned. Now, if any of my students resigned here, I don't know what I would do. Okay, I wouldn't consider resigning. This is a Super GM resignation. Okay, so obviously black can trade queens and then play king e7 or rook d8, and it's opposite color bishops with even pawns. And if black does trade queens, the engine says white's winning. Strategically, white's bishop is better, white has a passed pawn, white has a better rook, black has no counterplay, black's bishop can't move, etc. And the engine says white's winning. Okay, and Kasparov knew if he traded queens, he's losing and has no counterplay. Any other move, he loses his bishop on d6. And the obvious move that doesn't trade queens is queen e3. Okay, and Kasparov must have thought, he takes the bishop, I take his bishop, and he takes my rook. Okay, or he could play queen e6 check and rook a7 and checkmate me. So Kasparov probably looked at queen e3 for like 10 seconds and said that loses. He probably looked at trading queens for a minute and said that loses. He probably sat there for a while and resigned. Okay, and the engine, even at the time, the Deep Blue engine, said queen e3, draw. But Kasparov resigned. If Kasparov resigns and it's wrong to do so, maybe you shouldn't resign. Maybe you don't know when to resign if Kasparov doesn't know when to resign. Okay, and probably none of you would resign, although I'm guessing 99% of chess players wouldn't play queen e3 because the bishop's hanging and the rook's hanging. They would probably trade queens and try to draw the endgame, and the engine says that white's winning. Doesn't mean white's going to win, but engine says white's going to win. Okay, so queen e3, queen takes d6, and now the move Kasparov missed, rook e8. And Kasparov probably thought, if I save my rook and I stop queen e6 check, I'm just down a bishop. And the engine says the bishop's hanging and black has perpetual check everywhere. Okay, and this is a very complicated position. If two engines were playing, the game would end in a draw. Now, of course, Kasparov probably didn't see rook e8, so his resignation isn't really ridiculous. If Kasparov didn't play queen e3, rook e8, he was going to lose. So probably would have lost if he had played on. That's why I said earlier, when you're not losing and you resign, that's less egregious because you don't know that you're not losing. You're prepared to play lines that lose. That's why you resigned. Kasparov wasn't going to play queen e3 and rook e8. Okay, an engine would, but Kasparov didn't see that. Okay, you can't play rook a7 check because the queen's here. So the engine gives all kinds of analysis. I remember at the time, h4 was considered a good winning attempt. The idea is when black plays queen takes bishop and tries to give perpetual, white's king has the h3 square. But no human's going to play h4. It's still a draw, but I remember at the time the engine said h4 was best. Queen check, rook e7. This is one of the engine's main lines. Rook a1's the best move. Okay, and white's obviously better. White's trying to win. And this is all engine analysis. And check. And the engine says this is equal. Even though white's a pawn up, black has strong passed pawn. And king is no good. Passed pawns aren't very far advanced. And Kasparov may have played perfectly and got to this position. And when I say he may have, he wouldn't have. And he still could have lost this position. Okay. And the engine, when Kasparov resigned, the deep blue said queen e3. It looked a million moves ahead because that's what machines do. And it said equal. And when Kasparov resigned, he was hanging out with his team. He had a team of people working with him. And his team found out from the engine that the position was a draw. And now they had a conundrum. Should they tell Kasparov, hey, Kasparov, when you resigned, it was a draw. Queen e3 draws. Queen takes bishop, rook e8. Or should they not tell him, because that would make him feel bad, and he'd play the rest of the match worse. They decided to tell him because they thought it would be worse if he found out from somebody else, from the newspaper or from Deep Blue telling him or from some other grandmaster telling him and his team not telling him. They thought he'd be mad at the team if they didn't tell him. Although he'd be mad at the team if they did tell him. So they told him when you resigned it was a draw. That doesn't mean Kasparov would have drawn, but he resigned when he shouldn't have. And that's because he didn't see rook e8. He saw after queen e3, queen takes, queen takes, queen takes, or queen e6 check, there was no perpetual. But he didn't see rook e8, down a piece, and he's still drawing, which I guess a lot of grandmasters would miss. But he's playing a match for millions of dollars against an engine, probably shouldn't resign in a drawn position. But he trusted the engine that rook a6 was winning. He's like, the engine's not going to mess this up. And he had been having a terrible position for a long time, so he thought the engine was wrapping it up with the wrap it up button. Okay, the next few examples aren't so complicated. The first two examples were complicated, confusing the audience. Okay, these are easier. This is a game, Carlos Torre versus Frank Parker. Carlos Torre is the grandmaster who the Torre attack is named for. There's another grandmaster from the Philippines named Eugenio Torre. And Eugenio Torre played chess for 60 years, and he's still playing chess. Carlos Torre died a long time ago. This game was played in 1997 at the end of Carlos Torre's life. And Eugenio Torre was a better player. He was a more famous player. Famous friend of Fischer's. Carlos Torre, I think, was from Mexico, but I'm not sure. Anyway, he's playing in a simul, and he's giving a simul, and the arbiter stopped the game because the game was too exciting. Okay, both sides are getting queens and getting mated. And in this position, black is obviously and frankly, and his name is Frank, threatening rook c1 check, and then d1 equals queen. And if you were here earlier, I told you when you resign, when you're not losing, that's not as bad because you don't know you're not losing. You think you are losing. So all the moves you analyze lose. So white analyzed all the moves and they all lost. So white resigned. Very reasonable, except never resigned. And white is actually winning in this position, even though rook c1 check and d1 check looks unstoppable. Well, white is still winning. And for white to win, white has to make the most ridiculous move. And Carlos Torre, giving a simul, didn't see the most ridiculous move. He looked at the normal moves, like f7, and he said, well, rook check, d1 queen, I'm down a queen and a rook. Okay, so he resigned. Okay, the most ridiculous move wins. Now, when black plays rook c1 check, white must play king takes d2. King takes d2 is illegal. We must make king takes d2 legal. Okay, it's like make America great again. Make king takes d2 legal. Okay, and in this position, white has one move that does that. It's the most ridiculous looking move. But it wins the game because if black doesn't play rook c1 check and d1, white's going to play f7 and get several queens on the king side. Winning move for white, instead of resigning, was rook d6, confusing the audience. Yeah, the audience is you guys.
Wow, that's a great move.
Yeah. So the idea is, if you take with the rook, I make a queen with check, and the engine says white's winning. Although it's actually very complicated. This isn't an easy win. This is a complicated win. If you play rook d8, then it's an easy win. Then I take it. Then I play f7, and this pawn's not dangerous. This pawn's dangerous. Okay, and then white's winning after king d7, although I don't remember why. Although I've seen this game before. And when I saw the game, I remembered why. Maybe queen g2 check and queen takes d2 wins. I don't know. Oh wait, queen g2 is not check. I was looking ahead already. Okay, and obviously if you take with a pawn, your rook is not protecting your pawn, so I play f7, and black doesn't have any threats. Rook c1 check, I just take it. And white's winning. So if Torre had played rook d6, he probably would have won, but he didn't see rook d6, because that's crazy. That's a chess problem, not a chess game. It's hard to see problem moves in a chess game. If I told you white to play and win, and didn't tell you it was a chess game, you might solve it. If you were sitting down playing a chess game, and you had to play white here, and you didn't know you were winning, you'd probably think you were losing. That's what Torre thought. Torre is giving a simul, so he can't sit there for 10 minutes and find rook d6. Nobody's telling him he's winning. Anyway, I knew this game too, because it's a famous example of resigning when rook d6 is actually winning the game. Okay, this game actually was played last year. I didn't mean to start from the beginning, so I'll go through it quickly. This is the game Nakamura Carlsen. Okay, and the game's too complicated. Okay, because Nakamura and Carlsen are good. Okay, so white's attacking on the king side. Black has the two bishops. Carlsen always sacrifices the exchange. Okay, and in this position, queen e2, Nakamura played the move rook g1. And if I remember correctly, this was a rapid game. In this position, both sides had less than 5 minutes. Shouldn't resign in rapid games because, you could be wrong. Could be you just don't see the right move. And in this position, Carlsen made a move that Nakamura didn't see, confusing the audience. And Nakamura trusted Carlsen because Carlsen doesn't blunder, Carlsen just wins. Carlsen's been winning for 20 years. That's what Carlsen does. Carlsen's been over 2,800 for 15 years. That's what Carlsen does. And when Carlsen plays a tactical move you don't see, and it looks like it wins, you get deflated. And this happened last year, and Carlsen played a move Nakamura didn't see. Bishop g4, confusing Nakamura. Okay, and the arbiter, again, had to stop the game because it was too exciting. Okay, now all of white's pieces are hanging. The most obvious variation, very obvious, doesn't matter what your rating is, rook takes bishop, queen takes f3 check, and white resigns. If rook g2, I can play queen g2 check. If you're mean, you can play queen takes queen, and be a queen up. If you play king g1, I take this and win all of white's pieces. White loses all his pieces. And basically, there's no other variations. So after bishop g4, Nakamura resigned. Because he didn't see bishop g4, and he's like, uh-oh, bishop g4 wins all my pieces. Okay, then it was found out soon thereafter, or during the game, that White's winning here. But Nakamura didn't see the winning move. So for those of you who are watching live, which isn't many of you, do you guys see the winning move? White to play and win. Nakamura didn't see it. He resigned. So if you don't see it, that's okay. What's that?
Knight g5?
Knight g5 is incredibly losing. No move loses more. Then I take your queen. Truth hurts. Yeah, black has two threats. Three threats. Bishop takes queen, bishop takes rook check, queen takes rook check. All of those moves win all of White's pieces and typically ends in mate. Okay, now Nakamura, not a George Thorogood fan. If Nakamura was a George Thorogood fan, he would have found the right move. He could have asked George Thorogood, what do I do here? Now, for those of you watching, 90% of you are like, who's George Thorogood? Use Google and find out. Okay, and one of George Thorogood's hit songs, not his most famous, is Move It On Over. You got to move it on over. The rook on f3, we move it on over. Carlsen didn't see rook g3. Nakamura didn't see rook g3. The engine sees rook g3. Then the engine resigns for black. Black resigns. Chess is easy. So instead of resigning, Nakamura could have played rook g3 and Carlsen would have resigned. That's a pretty big mistake. Then Carlsen would have been pretty unhappy. If you play bishop takes queen, checkmate. If you don't play bishop takes queen, I'm incredibly attacking your bishop. Also, White's up material. White's up the exchange and a pawn. This wins another piece. If you play knight f6, defending your bishop, queen takes bishop check, wins all of black's pieces. So after rook g3, black has to resign. White's winning. But instead, he didn't see rook g3. He trusted Carlsen. He resigned, and that happened last year. If only Nakamura was my student, he would know never resign. Now, of course, Nakamura didn't see rook g3, so if Nakamura didn't play rook g3 and he played another move, he would have lost. So again, that's why it's less egregious to resign when you're not losing than when you are losing. When you are losing, just be losing and win the game anyway. Stop giving up. When you're not losing, but you don't know why, then you were probably going to make the losing move. You probably didn't see rook g3. You wouldn't have resigned. Imagine if Carlsen was playing a weak player, like somebody like me, and then I played rook g3. Man, the truth would hurt. Because then Carlsen loses to me. Terrible. Okay, but Nakamura trusted Carlsen. Carlsen doesn't blunder. Looks like black's winning all the pieces. So he resigned. Okay, last but not least, this is a famous game from 1902. I didn't mean to look at the whole game. We'll go through it quickly. Pretty good game. I have no complaints. Both sides are playing reasonable. It's 1902, so I don't have high aspirations for, 2700 play. Also, the players are virtually unknown. I've never heard of White. I think I've heard of George Marco, but I don't know, maybe not. Okay. Position, the game makes a lot of sense. Very reasonable. Nobody's blundering. Everybody's happy. Black has the two bishops. Material's equal. In this position, white wants to play e5 and queen h7 mate. So black plays e5 and says you're not going to play e5. Knife f5. Okay, and they got this position. So far, the game's been pretty good. The game's been about equal the whole way. Maybe one side was better, but nobody was ever winning. And in this position, Wijk thought he was winning and played sort of an obvious move, rook d1. And he said, your bishop's attacked. If you move your bishop, I'll take your rook. If you don't move your bishop, I'll take your bishop. So rook d1, pretty obvious move. Okay, now, I'm confused because if I had black and I thought queen takes e5 lost to rook d1, which it doesn't, then I wouldn't play queen takes e5 because I would see rook d1. But if I realized rook d1 is actually a blunder, then I would play queen takes e5. Black, I guess, didn't see rook d1, I guess, because he resigned. Because rook d1 wins a piece. Now, if I was black and I saw rook d1 and thought I was losing a piece, then I would play bishop takes e5, and I wouldn't lose a piece. I don't understand what black was doing. Like, black made a move which looks like it loses. Then when white played the obvious winning move, black resigned. Very strange. Now, if black was more on the ball, he would have realized rook d1 loses, and he would have still played queen takes e5 because rook d1 loses. Okay. After rook d1, black resigned. And again, before I prepared games for this lecture, I knew this game. This game's a famous example of resigning when you shouldn't. Okay, and if anybody watching live, black to play and win. Again, it's a strange looking move, like in the Carlos Torre game, so black didn't look at it, because it's a strange move. If this was a puzzle, and I set it up, and I said black to play and win, I would expect a lot of people to solve it. But during a tournament game, I would expect nobody's telling you black's winning. You would just think you're losing your bishop on d4. The people in the live audience aren't saying nothing. It's probably the strangest looking move in the position. It's not a move you would ever play unless you get the chance, which you have the chance now. Okay, and answer, confusing the audience, is bishop g1, which black missed and white missed. Much better than resigning, but now black's winning. Black's threatening queen takes h2 mate with advantage, and black's threatening rook takes queen. You can stop one, you can stop the other one, but you can't stop them both. Obviously, mate's more important, so you probably take the bishop, don't want to get mated, and then you have this lost position. I assume black would have won. Maybe black would have lost anyway. Maybe black would have hung his queen. No. So in this position, white played rook d1 question mark, losing to bishop g1, and black resigned. How can I give a move a question mark when the other guy resigns? But bishop g1 is winning. Threatens mate, threatens the queen, and the only reason the players didn't see it is they didn't have tactics on the internet you could practice because it was 1902. So the tactics weren't invented yet until 1903. So bishop g1 wasn't even possible. No tactics. So black could have won because he had the two bishops. But no grandmaster ever said two bishops, what else, in 1902. So nobody knew about it. That's too bad, because if I played bishop g1, I'd be pretty happy. That's a pretty cool move. But instead, black resigned. Now black's famous for resigning a winning position. His whole lot, when he died, which was a long time ago, he's still famous for losing this game. So remember, if you blunder or resign when you're winning, make sure nobody sees the game. Otherwise, hundreds of years after you die, people will be laughing at you. Man, the truth hurts. Anyway, I want to thank our sponsor again, Anonymous. If you want to sponsor a lecture, contact my wife, Karen. Her details are in the description. We try to have a sponsored lecture every week, so we need some more sponsors. We've got a couple in the queue. I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment. Helps out the channel. Watch all of our other videos. We have over 4,000 videos on the channel. God damn. And we'll have more videos coming up in the future, and you guys can enjoy those too. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks to the sponsor. See you guys next time. Bye.